Now we're live, the way we're supposed to be live. Oh my gosh, dude! I earlier today I was like, oh, it's Thursday. We have the Kessel Chat tonight. I'm like,
yes.
And then tonight I was like, Shannon's like, it was like 8:30. Shannon's like, she's like, don't you have to go get ready? I'm like, like 30 minutes. It's fine. We can finish watching the Tiny House show that we're watching. And then like 10 minutes, I'm like, oh crap, I do have to like all the overlays I've got to set up. And oh my god, I haven't like I'm so out of practice. Like I was in such a routine. And, being off for a little bit. I'm like, oh my god, I gotta get my brain back into this again.
Hey, I completely am with you. Like, I mean, it was a couple of weeks there that we took off because both you and I were traveling.
Yeah.
Both you and I were traveling. Both you and I were away. Now we're back. I will say I too am a little out of practice. Also, my background's changed since the last. And in fact, I was like rushing to like clean up so that way we could actually have like I could come on the show. Because otherwise, you would see that I have doubled down on a couple of Star Wars projects in my household.
Nice.
My boys and I we built one of the Lego like A-wing fighters.
Oh, nice.
And so then they were like, "Oh, let's do more." And I said, "Great, yeah, let's do that." So I got an X-wing, and then I got the Razor's crest.
Razor Crest?
And Razor Crest, yeah. And so we're going to be building those over the summer. And we're having a really good time with that. But they're all over the place. Like there's all these pieces that are all over the ground over here.
That's so cool. Yeah, my wife and son got me for like Father's Day, birthday, because they're kind of close to each other. They got me the Bad Batch shuttle set. So I've got the Bad Batches.
Oh, that's awesome!
Their custom shuttle set.
Gosh, that's so cool!
Right? And what's even more cool is it came with from at least one of the episodes. The like speeders that they pop.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so there's like two of those. Yeah, there's like two of this. It's really cool. The saddest part about it though, and I love it, but the sad part about the whole thing is which one is it? Is it this one? Oh shoot! One of these Crosshair is in here someplace, and it's kind of sad because you look at it and you're like, oh, Crosshair. We don't like Crosshair anymore. I'm like, oh, that's so sad. But it's actually I just broke it. That's not good. I'm gonna stop playing with it. I'm gonna break it again. But yeah, now the problem is I just gotta figure out where the heck to put it because I don't actually have any more space to put like anything, including books. Like my shelf is now like actually sagging a little bit. I'm like, crap. I gotta like replace these shelves because they're not really mounted super well. And now I need more like space on the floor because even my comic book box that's right down here is mostly full of comics I haven't even had time to read yet. So. Oh,
dude, I'm behind myself on a number of books. I see that Joanna's on the channel. She
like.
Go ahead.
There it is. I'm hearing an echo in the audio. It's clearly It's clearly just you, Joanna. Sorry, it could not possibly be us in any way. No, I'm kidding. Totally kidding. I have this box of comics down here. I got through a chunk of them on a couple of my days off, like for my birthday. But there's still more than half that box is comics I haven't even read yet. I'm like, God, I gotta do something. Plus, here's the next stack I came out of that box. I haven't even read it. Catching up on Vader back issues that I haven't even caught up on.
Oh, and the Vader comic series has been turning out amazing. I know we're going to be getting in the show here in just a minute, but yeah, man, dude, I'm right there with you. Like, this was going to be the summer of me, like, doing a ton of reading. Like, I was going to be reading. I was going to be doing a bunch of stuff. I just have not gotten to it yet. Mm-hmm. And, of course, like, life keeps getting in the way.
Yes.
Which is, good, bad, or otherwise. But I will say that I'm really excited because I've got a lot of things that I can't wait to start doing. I'm going to start trying to my daughter has really got me into the drawing on iPads as well, and so I'm doing that. I'm really enjoying this. I'm trying to really use the time that we have in this summer before all my kids go back to school and while we have all this downtime, or at least it's a quieter time, to be able to like explore a couple of things, catch up on some reading, catch up on some shows.
Yep.
Strange New Worlds. Oh my gosh!
Fantastic.
Jeff, we can do a Strange New Worlds episode next week.
And
I'm not joking around. I think I know this is not a Star Trek podcast, but Strange New Worlds might be some of the best Star Trek I've seen in 25 years.
Anson Mount is just, I mean, everybody on that show is amazing, but Anson Mount just crushes it as Pike. I mean, in general, but as Pike, he is just, he is fantastic. Absolutely. Every actor in that show does such a great job. They really do.
Yeah. Although I feel like there's some contract with Rebecca Romaine that says she can only be on an episode for 5 minutes. Because she is absent like all the time. Like they're like you'll hear her voice and then it's like, oh, she's gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I love all of the characters, all of the actors. I feel like they cast that show really, really well. Dr. Mbega is like one of my all-time favorite characters, especially because I like when like in Star Trek they would often have just giant ships of single people in space. And I think it was Jerry Taylor, who was a writer for The Next Generation, said, why are all these single people in space? Why aren't there families? Why aren't there spouses? Why aren't there people that like are living other lives other than just like Starfleet? And I like that we get to explore his story as a parent. But yeah, I mean, Ethan Peck, who plays Spock. Yeah, it's just so great, all of it.
I love. By the way, I really loved. I know there's mixed reviews in general from people about whether they like Discovery or not. I actually really enjoy Discovery, and I actually really liked it when they finally split from the main timeline and kind of did the future.
Yeah,
and
did their own thing.
I really liked it how at that point they actually crossed over with the people from with Pike and all of this. I actually really liked that all that split happened because it feels like now it gets to be very much its own show. But I also love how they did it where they brought the two different crews together. And we got to see Anson Mount and Rebecca Romaine, all these people like interact with Discovery and like make these things cross over with each other, but then go back and split again and to be very distinctly their own shows with their own stories in their own way. I like it because I never felt like, even watching Next Generation or Deep Space Nine and any of those, even if they did happen in the same time period, I never really felt like they were in the same realm. Like maybe there was crossovers here and there, but it never felt that way. Whereas this didn't have to even happen for very long, but it very much gave you the sense of like, no, these are literally happening at the same time as each other, but they can be two different sets of stories and all that. So I really loved it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Should we get into it? Because I know we got some folks
Let's
here with
go.
us right now. Thanks everyone for being here. Let's get started.
Yeah. Punch it.
Oh, feels so good to be back. To be back in these transitions again. It's completely wild. Dude, it's been way too long. And it's not even been that long, but it still feels like it's been forever. Thank you everyone for being here.
Oh.
I wanted to say, actually, before we kind of jump into anything, I wanted to say that for anyone who's been with us for a while, or even is just catching this up, like when Ryan and I started doing this over a year ago now, it's been wild that it's been that long. It initially was, we're doing this for fun, and it gives us a chance to hang out because we don't live that far apart from each other, but it's enough that it's not convenient to drive quickly. But more importantly, it was the pandemic. We couldn't get together physically. Like, hey, we get to just hang out. And if people want to watch this, that's kind of cool too. And it's just wild that it's come this far and that, you know, people like watching it with us and like being here and that we're still able to do it and have a good time with it. And it just, I don't know, it's really cool that we're still able to do this and have such a good time and have people watch and be a part of it. So I love this.
Yeah. And I got to say too, Jeff, like, so in the last 3 weeks, we haven't been as active. First, Jeff and I had to go to a big event that our work put on. Then I got super sick and was like out of commission solidly. And then Jeff's birthday was last week. So Jeff got his birthday off. Happy birthday to Jeff. And so, but in that time, Jeff, you've also been doing like these small short videos. And that's been really cool because I know that a lot of people have been watching those.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun. And it worked out really nice because I've been making content for TikTok, Star Wars content for TikTok for a while now. And I love it. And I realized, hey, these videos are just sitting here. Why don't since anyone who's here probably knows that YouTube has this new function called Shorts, which are essentially like a TikTok or an Instagram Reel, that style of thing. I'm like, well, I have all these videos. Who cares if it has a watermark that says TikTok? Let me just upload them and see what happens. And people seem to really like them. Like, we've had a lot of really good traction on these videos. So huge thank you to anyone watching who's watched those videos and been a part of this, because it's nice to see our channel growing in ways that we didn't necessarily expect from the beginning. It makes it fun. It makes it interesting. It's been getting me excited. I actually have my books in the house, but I have a whole list of videos I'm going to try to record tomorrow to get ready as not just like the short style, but regular videos to put up. I've had 2 or 3 I've put up so far too. And it's fun to see this traction happening. It's kind of, at least for me, I don't want to speak for both of us, but it's creating a lot of motivation for me to like want to get some more content created. You know, these live streams are a lot of fun and I thoroughly enjoy doing it. Also want to be putting more time into actually creating standalone videos too, because there's just so much. Like the High Republic Phase 2 starts in October of this year. All kinds of a huge roadmap of books and everything. Takes place 150 years before the High Republic that we already got. So it's like, we get a year of the High Republic, and then we jump back in time even further behind that for all new sets of stories before in Phase 3 it comes back into the main timeline. So like, I'll have all that happening. We have Andor coming out, Ahsoka's coming out next year, Mandalorian Season 3, and Bad Batch, and Tales of the Jedi, I think is what it's called. Like, just so much content that is coming out over the next 6 months to 7 months. I mean, it's bananas how much is coming.
I really am excited about that. I like the short form content. We've been mapping out a lot of content to be able to put together. But that said, to the point that you made earlier, it's so much fun to every Thursday come on the show and be able to talk about things that we haven't. The 3 weeks ago, we were saying, okay, we've covered Obi-Wan, the Obi-Wan show, episodes 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. And then we kept saying, next week, we're going to come in, we're going to talk about episode 4, and then we're going to talk about episode 5, and then we're going to talk about the finale. And so now we have a little bit of catch-up to do with our audience here, because we have episodes 4, 5, and 6, which I actually am okay with talking as a grouping.
Yes.
Because of how those stories work out. But maybe we could just start at like the highest level, which is, what did you think about the series overall? We're now done. We've been able to watch all 6 episodes. What do you think?
Oh, okay. Let's try to do this. How can I even sum it up? I'm even trying to think of like a single word that I could pick. I think for me, this show, I don't ever want to say, it's hard for me to ever, in good conscience, say something.
Oh, and I don't mean to interrupt you. Spoilers we're going to talk about this series.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
So anybody that has not watched anyone that hasn't watched this, we are about to get into the spoilers of the Obi-Wan series. So please, I didn't mean to interrupt, but go on ahead, Jeff.
No problem. My sound effects seem to be broken, but you get it. Spoiler warning. Huge spoiler warning. This show impacted me, I think, emotionally and mentally more than any other piece of content that Star Wars has ever put out. Many others have come close. Rogue One, even Solo to a degree. The reason why I realize is, for me, the one word I could pick, I think I'm finally realizing, the one word I could pick that sums up this show for me is trauma. The whole show was centered around a person who is mentally unwell, primarily from trauma that they are not processing. They're not letting themselves deal with. They're not working through it. None of that. They're trying to find ways just to avoid it. And we get to a point, the person, he still has trauma, clearly at the end of the show. But for the first couple of episodes, we are seeing a person who is very clearly wrecked, like PTSD, wrecked with trauma. And this is it, to me, it was so impactful because as somebody who has anxiety and some depression as a result of that anxiety, because they kind of go hand in hand. I've been going through therapy for a while for it. I'm on medication to help me with it. I recognize a lot of these things. I'm like, holy crap, this is hard. I love watching it. and it wasn't hard to actually watch, but watching it very much hit me because I'm like, wow, these things that he is not doing stand out to me now. Like I see this and I'm like, oh my God, the resignation, the sense of being alone and all this other stuff that he's dealing with. I'm like, dude, if you just talk to somebody for a couple of minutes and processed some of this, like you would be such a different person, but you're not. And it's been 10 years. What have you been doing to yourself for 10 years? Like this is where a person ends up when they don't let themselves process through these trauma or these mental issues, these mind health issues that they're clearly dealing with. I cried almost every single episode, sometimes because I was just excited to see a character on the screen, many other times because like, oh my God, I recognize what this character is going through and it's making me feel something this in a visceral way that I hadn't felt like outside of my own therapy sessions with my own therapist. I'm like, oh my God, like it took, that first half of the series to be like, what is happening? Oh my God. Like every episode I get up and just kind of walk away, be like, maybe I just need to go to bed now. Or maybe I just need to watch something very happy for a couple of minutes because I don't think I can sleep until like leaving the show. I need something else. Like I'll go watch Iron Chef because I just need my mind to be someplace else before I can go to bed. How about you? And actually, Duke, I'm so glad you're here, buddy. And I saw your word broken. I definitely think that label or that word could apply to, could very much apply to what he seems like, Obi-Wan seems like in the beginning of the series. But Ryan, I'd love to hear what your overall thoughts of the series were.
So, in the first 3 episodes, and by the way, I agree with almost everything that you said, and by the way, you're always so gracious with how open you are. And I just want to compliment that how you're able to tie in that personal connection that you feel to the things that you consume. I always think that's just great to be able to like kind of it's very nice. And I just want to say I appreciate how open you are about that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that. And you know what? I just on that note, I'm letting myself become more and more comfortable. It's not easy to say it out loud, but I'm letting myself become more and more comfortable with being open and transparent about it because I realize it's the one thing I can do to really help people. If I can do anything to help other people who have their own mental health issues that they have to work through, is to be willing to say it out loud that I have something and I'm working through it. You're not alone. Like even so, no one has to ever say anything to me, but just letting anybody else know that like, yes, many of us are dealing with these things and we have to work through them and they're not easy and there is no end to it. I think it helps because we just need to be everyone needs to be able to say these things out loud. Too often, for the longest time, it was pushed aside. We don't talk about that. You have trauma. Like, what do you mean you have trauma? Like that, like you got hurt in the arm or something? Like it wasn't something that people would talk about. And I think it's necessary and helpful for everyone to feel like it's okay to say this out loud. It's all right. It's okay to, we go to a regular physician because, our bodies are unhealthy. We go to therapists because our minds are unhealthy. It's just another malady that we have to deal with. Everybody as a person has to deal with. It should be okay to talk about. You got a broken leg? Sometimes you have I would say a broken mind, but you have other things going on. Why can't we talk about that too? It should be okay to be talked about. It should be normalized. So anyway.
I think that's the heart of a lot of like things that we consume now. Which is, like, I know this is going to sound silly, and this is not I don't mean to go on a bit of a tangent, so I'll just keep it simple, which is, I was thinking a lot about the things that I watched when I was a kid in the 80s, which were probably things I should not have watched. But they were all, like, super surface levels. Like, a movie that I grew up with, which outside of Star Wars, which I again should not have seen as like a 6-year-old, was Predator. And Predator is like performative masculinity, right? Like I'm not like I just think about how like the whole movie is them getting hunted by something in the jungle, and then at the end, through grit and strength, spoilers for Predator, Arnold Schwarzenegger defeats the Predator. And what looks like a nuclear explosion goes off, which he survives. And then they just like kind of cut, and it's like him just like standing there in the ash, like arms folded, like, yeah, I did that. I survived. And then there's not like the follow-up 25 minutes where he's like, I fought an alien that messed up my brain, if it bleeds, we could kill it. Exactly. like that could sum up what it was to consume things in the 80s. I was watching all these movies while I was sick because all I could do while I was sick was watch television. And I watched that. I watched Kroll, which I could do a whole episode on Kroll. I watched Lethal Weapon, like all these like crazy movies from the 80s because I was just like going through and I was just like randomly selecting. And then all these things came up. And I was just noticing, like, wow, everything's like crazy performative, and the more trauma that you have, the better you're able to bottle it up and put it in some type of vice, the more successful you were as a character. The opposite of that, which is also one of my favorite movies growing up, was Back to the Future, which is a movie about trauma from end to end. And that is, I mean, it's such a great movie about people having to deal with their past. And of course, you know, in Marty McFly's case, his parents passed. And so that was like my kind of thought process, like all the things that I'm consuming. And so I'm watching this series, and the first 3 episodes, I already brought up to you, I was like, wow, like, we're really meeting Obi-Wan at a low point. And that is not the character I was expecting to see. Mm-hmm. Because I remember Obi-Wan, you know, leaving at the end of episode 3, Star Wars episode 3. He goes off, he hands Luke off to Beru and Owen. And then he just like goes off in the desert. And then you see him again, and yeah, exactly. He strokes the beard, gets on the camel thing, and rides off. And in my mind, I thought, oh, and somewhere in the middle, you know, he kind of becomes kind of a crazy guy because he becomes kind of a scamp. And I've talked about this, like when you meet him again, and it's Alec Guinness. Alec Guinness has an acting style that's very much like he's a lovable scamp. Mm-hmm. You can't, you know, he's just up to something. You know, it's so much so that it's almost like he's a dangerous type of scamp. I mean, again, he cuts off a guy's arm in a bar. And I thought when I started watching the Obi-Wan series, I was like, man, how does this guy who seems to be all beat up, how does this guy get to Alec Guinness? Mm-hmm. Because there's a long journey there. And the first 3 episodes, I was really worried because all I saw was a character who is, just as you pointed out, like dealing with dealing with the result of their actions, feeling alone. I also thought about how Luke was being portrayed in The Last Jedi. I have it in my little notes here that I'm going to bring this up because Luke is also, man, it's like every great Jedi master has to apparently like go and live alone in the woods. It's like Walden. They're all like out there. Yoda's got to go away and live in exile. Obi-Wan's got to go away and live in exile. Luke, they all deal with failure in this way, which is I have to run from it. I have to get away from it, and I have to live alone so that way I don't cause this thing to happen again. Right. And oddly, canonically, the last of those stories is Luke's story, and in that, Yoda tells him, "Failure is our greatest teacher." And I thought about that while watching the last 3 episodes, 4, 5, and 6 of the Obi-Wan series. That what Obi-Wan really starts to realize is how to live with things, like how to live with failure as a teacher. And so I liked the way that there's like a pendulum that kind of swings. And it happens, I think, in episode 4 when Obi-Wan recognizes that he can sacrifice himself for others. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's my only issue is that he does that twice. He does it in episode 4 and then he does it in episode 6. And I'm talking about the Obi-Wan series. I'm not talking about the Star Wars movies, unfortunately. I gotta like figure out a new nomenclature here. But I don't like that they did that twice. I feel like they needed to only do that once. Obi-Wan, oh, I'll sacrifice, I'll leave. They're chasing me. But I liked the pendulum that swings back the other way, and that Obi-Wan really finds his finds out who he is again. It's like a personal rediscovery. And I really enjoyed that part of the story, and I enjoyed how that story is mimicked in Reva and even in Vader. That all of those characters have a moment where they finally come to terms with who they are and what they want to be. I loved that. Like, I love when you get to witness a character actualize. And all three of those characters, Obi-Wan, Vader, and Reva. And I know I talk about Last Airbender a lot. I know I talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series that I love to death, and Legend of Korra. I talk about it all the time. There's a line in Legend of Korra which is, when we are at our lowest point, we are open to the greatest amount of change. And that is what I saw there. I will also say, and I will save this talk, Jeff, for later in the show, the amount of references in the 6th episode to Avatar, the finale of Avatar. And I don't know if anybody else has watched Avatar as much as I do, but oh my gosh, the end of episode 6 there was, someone must have watched the battle between Aang and the Fire Lord. I was surprised that Vader didn't say something to the effect of, after years of searching, Providence delivers you to me. I'm not joking around. It was such a callback, but I really liked this. I got a hint at the end of that last episode that Obi-Wan was more on the path of becoming that Alec Guinness character that we see in Star Wars, the original Star Wars, than who he was at the start of this show. But yeah, I really liked it. There were things, and I've talked to you about this, there were things I didn't like, but there were a lot more things that I really liked that balanced this out. Yeah, I could go through it, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's interesting because one of the things I was thinking about is I can see I hadn't thought about the Alec Guinness piece, but what I could see very clearly is at the end of episode 6, when he's on his final little journey and he runs into Qui-Gon, like in that path, I can see him kind of like metaphorically going through the rock crevice that he's going through at the end of the episode and popping out the other side on his AOP, looking like what we saw in Star Wars Rebels when he meets up with when he finds Ezra in the desert, saves him, and then encounters Maul. Like that, I can very clearly see the path to that version of Obi-Wan, that sort of middle ground between where he is now and the Alec Guinness we see in episode 4, A New Hope. I can see that clearly, like not just because of how he's Ewan is doing the acting, but what we saw in the story throughout the entire season or miniseries, how he processed things, where his mind is at, how he's now in a place to start viewing things. And then when he encounters Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon it's very obvious. We knew Qui-Gon was going to say this in some way, shape, or form, that like you weren't ready. Like it, and I'm going to get back to that in a second because I think that's something that really resonated for me. But that moment to me is like, now he is on a path of understanding and learning, and he is ready to learn those things and accept those things. He wasn't beforehand. So that's actually the next thing I wanted to bring up is what I loved about seeing Qui-Gon as a Force Ghost. We knew it was going to happen, or I think we all pretty confidently believed it was going to happen because it made sense. Like Obi-Wan started the season off trying to talk to Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon needed to not be there until the end for a multitude of reasons. What I love specifically about not bringing him in until the very end is kind of coming back to that trauma thread, but also his learning, Obi-Wan's learning and growth through the series, just as a human and as a Jedi. When he's calling out for Qui-Gon, like, Master Qui-Gon, I really could use you. And he does it like twice, I think, in the first couple episodes. What I love about that is it reinforces for all of us that you can't, what he is doing is trying to find somebody to kind of like tell him where to go, to show him a path. Just give me a
Yes,
path.
or to rescue him. I was worried that Qui-Gon was going to appear with the Vader fight and help him out. And all I thought was like, no, Obi-Wan has to experience this alone. He has to dig himself out of this problem.
He has to be willing, exactly. He has to be willing to admit to himself, you have issues, dude. You have to deal with this. If Qui-Gon had appeared or anybody had stepped in, it would have given him an out. Oh, okay. I don't need to. I can continue to compartmentalize this stuff, and I can try to do this other thing. But he would never be whole, and we see that when he finally does encounter, and all he wants to do is run away. He is genuinely scared. Like, and Vader. I've seen people say, "Oh, Vader's just messing with him." I'm like, yes, but that's an oversimplification of what's happening. Vader's not just messing with him because he can. He's Vader. We see as a character, Vader wants to totally dominate his opponent, whoever it happens to be. He wants to dominate them in their mind, in their body, everything. Like he's not as Vader in his mechanical suit, he is not the best duelist by any stretch of the imagination because he doesn't have the physical dexterity, but he scares people because he doesn't talk much. He's intimidating. You can't see his eyes. Like everything about him is scary. And he plays off of that. And in that scene, he is really tugging on that thread with Kenobi, and it's working. And it's feeding his hatred and his anger. That's exactly what he wants. He wants that to happen. Like I don't even think he would have let Obi-Wan burn too much longer in the flames when he did it, because that's not what he wants. He wants him to suffer continuously, not just you're in pain until you burn up and die. He wants him to suffer like he is suffering every single day. And so to kind of get back to that idea of like Qui-Gon showing up, to me, it's like he could not show up until after you have worked through these issues and accepted that you have a problem and you've got to deal with it and found ways to work through it. But once you've done that and you've kind of not come out the other side, he's not healed by any stretch of the imagination, but he's accepted that he's got things he's got to do and he's got issues he's got to work through. Now a guide or a coach can show up to help you along the next step of your journey, which is, now what do I do next? Now that I've accepted this, how do I, cool. That's where a coach and a mentor can come in. Before that, they just become an enabler. No matter what their intentions would be, he would just be enabling. And that's not going to help somebody like Kenobi that we see in the start of the series. And I really, really appreciate that is the way they played out the series. I mean, yes, fan service. I would love to see Qui-Gon in a variety of ways, of course, because why not? But also, it does nothing for the story. It would not have helped. It would have caused major complications for the actual story without any actual real benefit, in my opinion.
Yeah, it would have been a cheat code for Obi-Wan. And again, like I'm not saying that you don't need a community to help you when you're struggling. What I mean is it to me it was really I knew that Qui-Gon was going to come back, and I was just so hoping it wasn't going to be in a fight or something. Right. And I thought, oh no, like Obi-Wan's got to like go through this himself. Mm-hmm. Obi-Wan's got to deal with his problems himself, because otherwise it'll be like, here, you take on my burdens. Here, Qui-Gon, you take on my burdens, and you solve these problems for me. And one of the things that I really liked was in the end when Qui-Gon does appear and Obi-Wan's out on the desert, and he sees Qui-Gon and he's Master Qui-Gon, you know, and Qui-Gon says to him, I was always there. It's one of these things that I like because it wasn't that Qui-Gon was staying away from Obi-Wan, but it was Obi-Wan staying away from Qui-Gon. And that's that kind of loss of faith that I think is the crux of this story. You're actually seeing someone, again, that twinkle in the eye that you get from Alec Guinness. To have that twinkle, to have that confidence, to have something there that isn't there in that first episode of Obi-Wan, you need to have that your character recover their faith, so to speak, their confidence, their belief in themselves, but their belief in something bigger, which again is the thing that Obi-Wan says to Vader, which is, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. Mm-hmm. And that's not just because he's like, oh yeah, I'll become a Force ghost. Right. He's talking about something bigger. And so I liked that little dialogue between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan at the end. But I also thought a lot about the story circle, which we've talked about in the past. And for anyone who hasn't, there's a great YouTube video where they actually use Star Wars as the story circle example. Oh yeah, Hero of a Thousand Faces. Hero with a Thousand Faces. But the story circle is something that's built by Dan Harmon, who's a television writer, and he adopted this from Joseph Campbell. But the whole idea of you actually watch Obi-Wan go through this, and great stories almost always work the same way. The person ends where they started. Obi-Wan ends where he started back on Tatooine, except he is, as the story circle it does to a character, he's changed. He's forever changed. He's had to make some sacrifices in that journey to be able to get the thing that he wants, but he does achieve it, and then because of that, he's able to access this greater knowledge, which is Qui-Gon. And so that was great. By the way, that healing in Obi-Wan, which Duke is pointing out here, which is episode 6, that to me was that twinkle moment. And again, I keep talking about this, but Alec Guinness, I give Obi-Wan a lot of crap. I've said he's, gaslighter, he's lying to Luke all the time, but Obi-Wan, R2-D2 is my favorite character. Obi-Wan's like right there though, because of the way Alec Guinness portrays him. I always liked Obi-Wan when I was a kid. I always thought he was such a cool guy, and he's trying to advise Luke, and even in Jedi when they're sitting there and they're talking, and I just liked the way Alec Guinness acted. And Alec Guinness is in a number of really great movies. Bridge over the River Kwai. Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia. Alec Guinness is an amazing actor, but his portrayal of Obi-Wan, he's got this little, again, the only way I can describe it is like a scamp. Like he's got this little twinkle in his eye, and he always seems to be like he's up to something. You're gonna need to learn the ways of the Force if you're gonna come with me to Alderaan. It's stuff like that. He's just great at it, and when that characterization Ewan McGregor channels right at the end there, when at the end of that episode and he goes up to the child, Owen says to him, would you like to meet him? That to me was like a huge emotional moment. I don't know why. I was just caught off guard when he's like, do you want to meet him? Which means he's never talked to Luke. He's been this watchful protector this whole time and has never been able to talk to Luke. And he goes over there, and Luke stands up and kind of greets him. And when he says, hello there, I was like, this is great.
Yep.
And Jeff, that's why we talked about this before the show. This is my hot take on the Obi-Wan series. It should end right there. It should end right there. We do not need any more. That is a complete story from end to end. He goes off into the desert with Qui-Gon. In my opinion, shut it down. We've got a great story. I don't think we need any more of it. My 2 cents.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I totally agree. What's fascinating, now that you frame it that way, because I hadn't thought about it quite like that. I don't know if you've ever read Stephen King's The Dark Tower series.
I haven't. I have not read it. I've started it many times, and I've never. It's a long haul.
Get the audiobooks.
It's Lord of the Ringsian. You know what I mean? It's
more like It's more like Wheel of Time ish, because it feels sometimes like it just drags on. But get the audiobooks, by the way. They make it a lot easier. I read the actual books long before I knew audiobooks were even a thing when I was a kid. But get the audiobooks to make it easy. But the reason I bring this up, and sorry, spoilers for anybody who hasn't read the Dark Tower series, freaking amazing series by Stephen King. But the reason I use it as a reference is, and I think I have the book here. Yeah, I actually have the book here. Hold on. It is a massive series. It's 7 books. This is the 7th book right here. Book 7 is, just for reference for everybody, outside of like, yeah, how many pages is this thing? This is 829 pages, and this is book 7.
Mm-hmm.
The last 4 books of the series are like around this size. It's an enormous story. Anyway, this is the final book. It's just called The Dark Tower. In it, this character, Roland, is trying to get to the Dark Tower, which is the center, like the world that he lives in is a parallel world to the world we live in, but it happens to be the center of all things. And in it, there is a dark tower. There's a tower that stands at the middle of all parts of the universe, no matter what world you're in. And the tower is being broken down by this thing called the Crimson King. Kind of like an allegory or a synonym for the devil, or that kind of general character in a lot of different religions and mythologies. Anyway, you get to a point in the story where Roland gets there, confronts the bad guy, stops the bad guy. He finally gets the tower. Like, his life's mission has been to get to this tower, as the world he lives in has moved on from like some apocalypse, and it's just they just refer to it as the world has moved on. He finally gets the tower, and he goes in the door, and the book ends. You're like, oh wow. You turn the page, there's a blank page. Turn the page again, and then there's a note from Stephen King that's like a page long that says basically, it's a great story. The story's over. Beautiful story. However, there is other stuff that I could tell you. He goes, but the story's over. And if you're good with this story ending the way it is, don't read anymore. Just stop here. Just stop. And he gives this whole beautiful, you read it, you're like, well, crap, now I have to read the next part. And then you read the next part, and it's the Qui-Gon. But in this, it is like it's more than that. Because this is like, goes the opposite way from the Qui-Gon. It's wait, what? No! I mean, oh my God, it makes total sense, but oh man, like it is a crap. I wish I had not read it, but also I really am glad I read it. But when you said that, it very much reminded me of that in this book, that it could have ended there and been a beautiful ending to the story. However, doing the additional thing definitely gives fan service and all that, and it's also an amazing, like, I'm not gonna lie. The first time I saw it in Qui-Gon on screen, just crocodile tears. I was just like, oh, my wife was looking at me. She was just like giving me a hug. She's like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, I was so happy. But yes, if it had just ended at the other piece, it would have been amazing. Like it would have been like that would have been the one time like in the theater I would have stood up and clapped. Like I hate when people clap at the end of movies. It drives me bananas. I don't know why I've stuck to that.
It's okay. Like it's me, that, and airplanes. Like when people clap when the plane lands, I'm always like, it's cool. Like that's the plane's landing. It's like what it does.
Yeah. But at that moment, like if I had been in a theater watching the ending, I would have stood up and been like, if it ended, hello there. Yes! Woo! Yes, okay, cool. I'm with you.
Oh, and he's got the little toy, and that's what I mean. He's reaching out for the first time. Like, he's making a human connection. And I will also say that I like the corresponding scene that he has with Leia, where he talks about her parents.
Oh, my God.
And
I love
that. Yeah, it was great. It was really great. Again, like, and if I could have another moment of a hot take here, I think it's great that we got 6 episodes. I'm really glad it was only 6.
Yes, agreed.
I think it could have been 4. I hate to say that, but it's like there was some times that I thought to myself, like they saved some of the best stuff for the end. And I actually would have preferred for them to take a little bit more time there. Let some of those scenes rest. Like, for example, one of the things that was an issue that I had was you have this amazing moment, where, Obi-Wan's kind of rushing around from the Leia story, kind of wrapping up everything that's going on with Vader, right? And then he's got to rush over to Tatooine because, oh my gosh, Luke's now in danger.
Right.
And that's one of those moments that I was like, oh, guys, like, you got to slow down. Like, I get that hyperspace jumps allow you to go from one planet to another, and it's nearly instantaneous. Like, I get that. But I didn't like how that ending climax where first he's dealing with Vader, which, by the way, that's your super bad guy. That's where you need to end your story like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got to go to Tatooine to deal with Reva because Reva's coming to get Luke. I almost was like, oh, you need to like give those two stories time.
Yeah, I agree.
And in fact, I thought what they could have done was actually move the Reva to Luke story maybe earlier. Like rather than having this weird back and forth, all this back and forth with Reva, actually make like every story is every story, if you think of it, is like a 3-act play, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your beginning, you have your rising action, middle, and then you have your conclusion, your end. And then in that, every one of those episodes is a 3-act play. And that's where I was like, oh, episode 4 was a little weak. And I think that it would have been helped if you make your middle middle pivot point maybe Reva's pivot. And now you've got Obi-Wan maybe a little bit more. I can deal with things. And then he gets in with Vader, and he's like, maybe I can do it. But of course, he gets in over his head, and then he's able to overcome. But that's the only part of the story that I wish they would have done a little differently.
Interesting. So I totally can see that. And actually, I'll get back to your comment here in just a second. But I totally can see that. My only challenge to what you're describing is, to me, no matter what happens in the Obi-Wan show, at the end of the day, his whole reason for being on Tatooine is to protect Luke. And so if we don't, so having Luke kind of be in danger and then that get resolved too early in the show and then the show continue would almost then feel to me like, well, these are two different shows now. So I actually really appreciated that the challenge or the defense of Luke, I guess is a one way to say it, coming back around at the end of the show, to me was actually a necessary thing because it brought it back to, but at the end of the day, everyone remember, Obi-Wan is here to protect Luke. Because if it happened in the middle of the show, the way that I'm viewing this, if it happened in the middle of the show, my problem with that would have been, like, I think it would have worked. Like, the show would have still been a good show. But I think the problem I have with it is that what would have happened is, well, now that he's protected Luke, like, why does he have to even stay here? Why can't he just go gallivant through the galaxy and have a good time and just check back in periodically? So I actually really like that they brought it back around to Luke at the end because it was, to me at least.
So I have my fix. I have my fix for this.
Oh, you do?
Obi-Wan wasn't needed. Reva brings back Luke to the homestead and lays him down and says, by the way, we talked a lot about people dealing with trauma. I loved Reva's story. I mean,
I agree.
It was so great.
Yes.
And she lays Luke down and she says, I couldn't do it. And I actually kind of thought that's why Obi-Wan even realized that he could leave and go and live off far away. Cause he's not going to be doing his little spy stuff, watching Luke from afar anymore. That he's leaving. He's going off now, going out beyond the Dune Sea. Because he knows, and this is a part of the story that I absolutely loved. Beru and Owen will do everything they can to protect Luke. When Beru says to Owen, we need to get ready, she'll come when the sun's set. All I thought was like, man, I love this characterization. That here they're two people out on the frontier, and they're going to protect this boy with their lives.
Magnificent Seven style, like that's the vibe I got. But okay, you know what? Okay, fair enough. So here's what I could see. Obi-Wan's not even aware that Reva's on Tatooine. Finishes up his stuff. He comes back. Reva has had the interaction with Luke. She's dropped him off, and she limps away. Obi-Wan gets back, goes there, does the hello there, and then there's some part where Owen's like, she was here. He's safe now. And Obi-Wan's like, wait, what? Kind of wraps. He goes back to his cave to like pack up or do whatever, and she's sitting there waiting for him.
She's there. Exactly, because
and they have a conversation.
And now it's the resurrection of a story that needs to happen, which is
I can see that.
Obi-Wan being a successful teacher.
Yes.
And her in need of a teacher. And then, like that's the only misstep that I thought, oh, I would have done this one differently. Like
that.
That's the only part of it that I would have done differently.
That's so interesting, because then what you could see happening is then when the two of them leave the cave, like maybe he's already packed up, or he comes back and packs up, and she walks in on him while he's packing up and disturbs him, and they have an interaction, and then he gets on his AOP and goes this way, and she walks off this way. Not only is it she's going off on her journey, limping away, less limp than when she got there. He's going off on his AOP, and they're both leaving this cave. They're leaving this place that was a source for him. They're leaving that part of both of their lives behind by walking away from this cave or this rock outcropping and going their different directions.
Yes, exactly. Walking away and going off in their own stories. And maybe even one where it's like, hey, like, I'll call on you in the future or something. Or like, again, like, this is a person that has...
If you need me, you know where I am. Sort of thing.
Exactly. And also, Ben is also like... I would have even liked, and I know this is going to sound crazy, I would have even liked a bigger story for Reva. This is where I mean by the Obi-Wan story could end, and I'm okay with a Reva show.
Right.
Because I wouldn't be against saying, hey, you know what? If you're looking for a teacher, I know someone on Dagobah. And give Reva the chance to be the Jedi that she never got a chance to be. Right. Because Anakin took that from her. And the people, the adults that should have been able to protect her couldn't. And the people that let her down, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's why I felt like Obi-Wan is a great story, because it gives that character, this series gives that character a really great send-off. And I know that I'm in the minority when I say all this. I think sometimes you've got to let, as Ben Solo would say, you got to let the past die. I kind of think you got to let these characters, these legacy characters, you got to put them to rest.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more.
And open up these opportunities for new characters.
Yes, I don't want a second season of Kenobi. Like, and I when I say that, I recognize that like people, you don't. Of course, my like inner my inner and my outer Star Wars nerd clearly like wants more Kenobi. Of course, I do. Yes. But to your point, it does I think it'll do a disservice to the character. To your point, we now know the path that he is on, how he got onto the path that he needed to be on to become who we saw in Rebels and then who we saw Alec Guinness portray. We now know that. We don't need anything else between now and that point. People want it, and that's okay. It's okay to want that, absolutely. But I think from a story perspective, I'm with you. We don't need it. It's good. Like, we can imagine. Hell, there's an entire Obi-Wan comic series where we're getting a lot of those takes right now. Leave it to the comic books. Leave it to other books, like the Brotherhood book that just came out, or Padawan that's coming out about Obi. Like, leave those stories to be told in other forms. We don't need more TV show to do it, because it's going to end up creating another Mandalorian style. And that's okay, but that's what the Mandalorian's doing, or Boba Fett, or
exactly, let these characters, let new characters come in, and again, I feel like when people are sad that something's over, and they're like, well, I wish I could have more of it. Be glad that that's how much you liked it. Like I remember I was really sad when I was getting to the end of we were talking about Lord of the Rings earlier. When I was getting to the end of Lord of the Rings, I remember being sad when I got to Return of the King.
Yeah.
And then when I found out, Peter Jackson making The Hobbit, this is going to be great, and it wasn't. It was and an like, you want to leave gas in the tank for a character.
Yes.
Because then there's room for something else. And there's room for imagination of a thing that you hope for a character. And a really good example of we're gonna use up all the gas in the tank is what they've done with Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek, and the troublesome Picard show, where the first season they kind of eked by. The second season, they're really struggling. And even Patrick Stewart doesn't seem to have the heart in it anymore. But Paramount's like, we got to have a new Star Trek show coming out every week. And so what they're doing is they're just keeping their foot on the gas of a property that they own. And if you're not careful, you'll use it up. And that's and they're at the point now where the next season of Picard, even before the second season was over, they announced there's a third season. And don't worry, we're bringing back the original cast, because they knew they had already used up all the gas of Jean-Luc Picard. So they're like, we're going to bring back Beverly Crusher, and we're going to bring back Worf, we're going to bring back all these other characters. And it's, again, because they're trying to bleed these characters for every little thing that they can get. And Obi-Wan, to me right now, you want your characters in a story to go through their trials and tribulations and then come through on the other side as big as they'll ever be. And Obi-Wan ends this series as big as he ever is. He's someone who's, and in my opinion, this gives the character a lot more gives Obi-Wan a lot greater amount of characterization. In episode 1, he's just a sidekick, which is unfortunate because he should have been the main character. In episode 2, he goes off and has kind of a mystery that he has to solve, and then he just like fights with Anakin. And then episode 3, it's pretty good. He's got a lot more characterization. He's got a lot more to do. He's got a relationship with the clones. He's got a relationship with Padme. He says this thing to her, which is like a cold line. He says, when he's talking with Padme, he says the baby's Anakin's, isn't it? I mean, it's still like that exchange that they have, him and Padme, where Padme says, you're going to go to kill him, aren't you? And Obi-Wan says, he's become a real threat. I mean, that's a great scene. There's a lot of really great characterization. This series, though, gives the room for that character to grow and breathe, and there's so much. And I would love to say that the story is done. I don't need any more. I want more, which is great, but I don't need any more. And they should end it. And that's what I mean by now invest all of these series that Disney's creating. They should always be trying to find new ways to invest interest in a new character. And they could have done that with Reva and really, really used that as a pilot. I know the Reva character was controversial, but I think at the end, everybody got on board with the Reva character.
Uh-oh. Oh no, did we lose Ryan?
And really, really well. Finding opportunities to introduce brand new characters and build from there.
I agree. What you made me think is, I think too often people, not just Star Trek fans, Star Wars fans, but anybody, fan of anything, watches a show like this. And like we both said, they want more. They want more. They want to be given more.
They want more.
And I think the unfortunate part about that is, and it's a nuanced thing. There is no single cause of this. But I think we've been brought to a point of so much content that is available in general on any platform that we can possibly consume it on, that we're kind of just given content all the time. And so Netflix is a great example of this. As much as I love being able to binge stuff on Netflix, I think it's kind of done a disservice to content consumption, because what it does is it gives you everything right away. I just get all the stuff I want. The problem I'm seeing with that is, especially when it comes to telling a really good story, is basically everything you're saying here is people are almost find themselves needing to have their feelings matched and defined by some piece of content in this video, and struggle when it's not, because they've been trained that someone's going to address this thing that I need, as opposed to, we are just going to let your imagination go. We're going to let you start to think about these things. Yeah. We're not going to continue it on just because you want something else. The story ended here. If you want to think about more and excited, do fan fiction, read comic books. Like, there's 100 other ways to tell additional stories that are really interesting in different ways and can be fun, but it doesn't need to be told in this way. This story specifically is now over. That story is done. Yes, does Obi-Wan have other... It's clearly implied that he has other, let's say, adventures, I guess. He has other adventures. But do you need to watch everyone? You want to watch every one of them, but that's not the same thing. That is a different thing. And I think it actually ends up doing a disservice to a character, because at some point, what you end up happening is like, cool, like all the stuff I wanted. It's kind of like when I was a kid, my grandmother would say this, and my parents would say this when we'd go camping or a vacation. If you leave when you're not ready to leave, you're always going to want to go back. And I think it's the same way with a character in a story.
That's so true.
If you continue it to the point of like, wow, I got everything I wanted, that is the emotion you are going to have when something new comes out later on. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I got everything I wanted. Okay, now what? Well, there's nothing else to have. Now I'm kind of done with it at that point. Who wants that feeling? In the moment, it's like getting the immediate high of like, I got a buzz from having a beer or whatever your thing happens to be. Cool, but there's nothing else beyond that. There's just more.
That's right.
There's just, now you have a buzz. What do you have now? More buzz. Like it's you've reached the peak, and now it's just a tiny little increment, and you're not actually getting more. But what you remember is the aftermath of that feeling, and it's not positive. And then what you are stuck with is like, well, now I'm here. I don't really want more of that. I'm not going to go watch the next thing that comes out. Like for me, Picard, like season 2 of Picard, I really enjoyed the first season. I'm like, oh, I get to see this again. This is kind of fun and interesting. It's a different thing. Totally cool. But then when I saw season 2 come out, I'm like, I used to love dystopian stuff. And now I see this fascist dystopian thing that they're going to do. I'm like, no, I'm good. I haven't watched it, and I have no desire to watch it. I'm like, no,
it's not good. I got what
I wanted out of the first season. Cool. You did a thing for this character that I didn't think you could do. Wow, that's kind of rad. I felt like it ended well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good. The crew goes off and does their thing. I don't need more. I don't want more. And that's a problem, because it made it so I was like, I have no interest in watching more of this. I think that would happen with Obi-Wan if they make a second season. I think it's not a jumping of the shark, but it'd be sort of like, yeah, I don't need this. Like, cool, but I don't need to have these things. I really want more and more people to get into comic books, because between print books and comic books, there's just so much room to tell smaller stories about these characters in different ways. We don't always need a TV show, and we definitely do not need more movies. No offense to anybody who loves movies. I love movies. We're going to go see Thor tomorrow. I love movies as much as anybody else. I don't want more movies. I want more Stranger Things season 4. I want more, hour and a half long season episodes that are basically, we got like 12 movies in Stranger Things season 4. How much story could they tell in a TV series compared to anything you could ever do in a movie? There's no way and the production costs and the time and all that stuff. We got a whole series. Like, do that more. Stop doing so many movies. And even with series, to your point, tell only as much in that series. Use only as many episodes as you need to get the story across, and then stop. You don't need to have 13 episodes if 5 will tell the story that you need to tell. I think that is a problem that we have these days, is there's so much content that is being made, and they create too much of it because they think they need to put everything in. It's like Game of Thrones the last season. Like, it was so short. People are like, oh, why was it so short? You don't need more than that. Like, less is more. Like, less, because it leaves you wanting other things. No, go get the books. Go read the fan fiction. There's so much more to tell, but it doesn't need to be done here.
Yeah, I think that there's also an issue with, I think, the monetization of a lot of these properties. Like, that's what drives a lot of this. But I'm just going to set that aside over here, and I'm going to just say that there's a phrase that I really like that's been kind of bandied about lately about some of these properties. And I also think this is just also an effect of, and I'm going to use like a real, my wife and I were talking about this. My wife and I are English majors, and I'm going to probably, I'm like, this is going to sound stupid to say, but it's like an effect of like postmodernism. We're like creating a creatively all these properties are slowly becoming like creatively bankrupt. And that's because they're trying to squeeze every little thing that they can get out of it. And so that's why when I saw the end of the Obi-Wan series, I was like, oh gosh, I hope this ends here. And there was a great tradition. And that's because storytelling was as much about the start and the middle as it was the end. That great stories have endings. And you can just end it if you don't have anything more to say. And, you and I have talked about a story that I loved growing up. That was one of my favorites, was Stuart Little. and it is a hard story to read to a child. And it was a hard story to read when I was a child, because spoilers for Stuart Little, it's not that it doesn't end well. It's that its ending it's not a completed story. And by design. Stuart is looking for his friend. He's gone through some adventures, some misadventures, and then he's in his little car, and he's on the side of a road, and he's talking to a person who's working on like electrical poles or something, or telephone poles, I can't remember. And he's asking about the migration patterns of birds, because he's looking for his friend, and his friend's a bird. And so then the last line of the book is that he decides that he's going to travel north. He doesn't know if it's the right way to go, but he doesn't know if he'll get to where he wants to go. But it feels, I think the last line is, but it feels like he's headed in the right direction. And that's the end of the story. Mm-hmm. And I've always liked that. I like when stories just get to the conclusion that the artist or the writer or whatever's trying to tell. And that's the thing that I think is, and it builds better audiences, I would say, by the way. Star Wars had like a 20-year gap between almost 20 years or 15-year gap between when Jedi ends and when Episode 1 came out in the 90s. And you know what? People were fine with that. There were comic books. There was the terrible Caravan of Courage movies. But then we were all fine with it. And then the prequels came out. And we're like, oh, cool. We get the prequels. It's like visiting an old friend. We really need to find ways to kind of let things go. Right. To say this is the end of it. And if there's no more of a story to tell, we can be done with it. And it's kind of like... a lot of these properties, like I'm really worried there's going to be a Dune movie after this part 2 that comes out. The Denis Villeneuve, who made the Dune part 1 and 2, he's making part 2 right now. Oh my gosh! Like visually, those are some amazing movies. I don't need a Dune part 3. Right. I fine. Like I don't need to see the Children of Dune. Like just end it.
The other, I'm totally with you, because the 5 other books in the main line that Frank Herbert wrote before his son and others took up the mantle, we don't need those. If you want to read the books, go read the books. They're fantastic. You can spend a lot of time with them. Things are vetted out. You will never ever get what you really want, which is the book, into a movie. It won't ever happen. Yep. Whenever it is made or tried to be made, they are terrible. Because they don't work. You cannot take a book and put it directly onto film. It just flat out doesn't work. I'm with you 100%. Yeah. I like, and actually, Joanna's comment here, story endings have a super important function of teaching us about life endings too. It's so true. Some things just end, and they need to end at that point. You want to know more. You want to know what the next thing is.
Yes,
but that doesn't mean that that's the right thing to happen at that point. The most recent Magnificent Seven movie that with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt and a handful, Ethan Hawke and others. The movie ends. Sorry, spoilers if you haven't watched it. It's one of my favorite movies to watch. Like I can watch that movie literally on repeat. I absolutely adore the movie. But I love at the ending how the remainder of the Magnificent Seven, the 7 people who defend this town, well, in addition to the townspeople, the ones who are still alive, as they ride off, it's very clear that they ride off, but there's no riding off into the sunset. Like they're riding in the same direction. Then one of them kind of rides off on his own. And that, it's clear that they came into something together, like a whirlwind, whirling dervish. They dealt with it. And now whoever's left is going to kind of go off together. But then it's clear that they're all dealing with their own trauma that they came into this with, and there's another story. Their life is going to continue, but we're not going to get that. Like we're not going to get to learn that. Like they don't just ride off in the sunset. Here's the Magnificent Seven. And everybody's happy, and look, they ride off, and they're going to all go retire. It's clear from this most current movie that's not what's happening. Like a good chunk of them, several of them die. Several are alive, but they're injured really bad. But they're leaving town. They're not talking to anybody as they're leaving town. They're like just kind of like at a nod, but like I just don't want to be here anymore. It's time to go. I love that because it makes you realize that these were humans, and they're going to go off and be humans and continue. Would anybody want to know what those characters are doing? Sure, yeah. But does it really help anything to tell the story that was being told in this thing? No, not even remotely. Like, it would be too much. Like, what happens when they cross over the hill? Maybe you want to know that they got into a gunfight and one of them died as they crossed over the hill, or someone fell off their horse later. Or, yeah, but how did that help the thing you just had? Like, that's what, Star Wars. That's what Wikipedia is for. Like, if you want to go learn all the semantic details from a game, go read Wikipedia. It's fantastic. Like, there's a huge source of information there, and you can learn all the things from legends and canon and everything you want to know about a character. But that isn't story. That's an encyclopedia. What people, I think, too often are conflating is storytelling with encyclopedic research. I want to learn all the things about the bio of a character. Great. But that's not a story. That's just data.
Yeah.
And that's fine if that's what you want, but don't conflate them because they're not the same thing and their purposes are very different. And I think too often that's like, I want more encyclopedic information because I just need to see more of Ahsoka on screen because I want that. No, what you want is an encyclopedia. You can go read all about her all day long. Do you want what you really want to watch is an actual story that has a beginning, middle, and end for ease of conversation's sake, because that's what you're going to enjoy. But when you inject an encyclopedia onto the screen, that's not, no one actually enjoys watching that. It won't be enjoyable to watch because it's just data at that point.
Yeah, and I think you got to start. I know this is going to sound like totally obvious, but I feel like so many of, especially because everybody just wants to get properties out there. It's like there's the new Willow thing that's coming out. And I was like sitting there going like, I liked Willow, but I'm excited. I was cool. I'm really excited to see like, oh wow, someone's gonna like do Willow. But again, it's like, it should start with the story first. Like, and this is, I think, an effect of like how we're moving into this kind of, and I know this is weird because we're moving out of the topic here, but I'm just so interested to see how things develop over the next 5 years, because everything is around like, well, what's a built-in audience we could take advantage of? And because the built-in audiences and the building on an existing property is something that is making money more often than not. The most recent example is the Top Gun movie. Where they're bringing back, Tom Cruise and Maverick and Matt. Oh wow, like it's Goose's son. Oh my gosh, the conflict. And I'm not going to bash that movie because I haven't seen it, and I've heard people say it's great, so that's cool. But what I mean is that movie got greenlit over some original idea because there's thought of, well, the Top Gun's a market. Like, we'll sell to the Top Gun market. And that's what I get worried about with shows like this, with the Obi-Wan show, is that it's like, start with the story first. If you've got a great story and you know what you're going to tell, and the story demands that it should be told, great. Let's see that. An example of where that didn't work out was, like, I think the Boba Fett show. I think someone was like, you know what we should do? We should make a Boba Fett show. And then they did that, and then they were like, oh gosh, we don't have any story here. Well, then let's put 2 episodes where we follow the Mandalorian. And randomly, because the Mandalorian doesn't have all of the weight of history and is a brand new character, they were able to make 2 amazing Mandalorian episodes inside of the Book of Boba Fett. This is where it's like, I get it. I get why you want to. There's a desire to keep mining this stuff. To there's a built-in audience, so we can sell it a little bit more easily. But I love to see new things. I love to see when people take risks or even reimagine something totally different. Like of the Voltron series that was on Netflix was a total reimagining of the 1984 Voltron, and it was great. I like when I really want to see more of the original stuff, and that's why I'm hoping that even Star Wars starts to migrate to that, and maybe even less frequently. I don't think we need as much content as we're getting all the time. It seems more special, if that's a way to describe it.
Yeah.
When we're able to, and I think Marvel's run into that problem too. Marvel's realizing that they're overworking some of these characters. I think the reason why Thor does so well is that it has departed so much from its original source material, and it's got someone like Taika Waititi,
Yes.
who Academy Award-winning screenwriter, who starts with the story first. Or Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn starts with the story first. The greatest example is the difference between Suicide Squad and The Suicide Squad,
Yeah.
which was one of those was made by James Gunn and one of them was made by I can't remember who. And you get these amazing stories because you have storytellers trying to tell a story first. I know that we're like way over time here. I'm happy to give this a letter grade and also bring up just a few things that I really liked about the show at the end.
Okay, let's do
I'd love to hear. I know we're capping it off here.
Yeah, we'll cap it off. You go first, and then I'll go like letter grade, and yeah, exactly what you said.
Okay,
let's both do it. Drum roll.
Letter grade. I'm giving this the whole series as a whole a solid B plus, and that I mean that in like a good way. Like I don't mean that. I don't have a problem with it. The only thing that kept it from an A was I would have liked a little bit more of building up some of the other side characters. I would have liked I would have liked this to be 5 episodes instead of 6 because I feel like they kind of deviated a little bit. Mm-hmm. But a solid entry. It was like visiting an old friend. Yeah. I really enjoyed the characterization. And again, I liked it so much that I hope that it ends. And I loved the storybook qualities of it. I loved the engagement with Leia. I even liked how they tried to tie it off and say, oh, hey, if you ever need me in the future, don't call me by my name. I like that a lot. I even like, I loved the relationship that Obi-Wan and Leia have. I thought that was great. I liked that the story was strong enough to tell about someone who loses and then reclaims their faith in themselves, no less. And then side notes. If anybody wants to see something that's crazy, watch the last episode of Obi-Wan where he fights Darth Vader in those pillars, and then at one point he brings up all those rocks around him, and he starts throwing the rocks and everything. Now, watch that scene. I loved it. Watch that scene, though, and then go and watch the last episode of Avatar, The Last Airbender, when Aang has to fight the Fire Lord, and he goes into the Avatar state, and you'll see those rocks come up, and then you'll see even the fact that they're fighting in these, like, kind of pillars, like rock pillars. That is almost a shot-for-shot inspiration. Nice. From Avatar. I loved that. And again, this episode ended. My favorite part of the Obi-Wan series is that it ended the way that all great Westerns do, which is riding off on horseback, or in this case, not horseback, but beast of burden, riding off into the sunset. Off into the desert. It reminded me so much of all the Westerns that I love. And I know that I was talking earlier about Searchers vibes. This movie throws off so much Searchers vibes. And that end scene where Obi-Wan, John, in the end of the Searchers, John Wayne can't go through the door because he can't be a part of the family. Jeffrey Hunter can go through the door. Everyone else can go back in. The quest is over. Natalie Wood has been found. They're able to all go in. Again, Searchers, terribly problematic movie. The tons of trigger warnings, calling that out. But still, John Ford, amazingly shot movie. And at the end, everyone can go into the house except John Wayne. And that's because he's outside of everyone else. He has to now be alone, and and the door closes on him like The Godfather. The door closes on him, and that's the end of the movie. And this show reminded me so much of that. A character who has lost their faith finds it, reclaims it, but then has to leave on their own again because they can't rejoin society. That's not for them. No. And so again, B plus. And those were the things that I liked.
Nice, dude. That's awesome. For me, the show got solid A, just solid A. And the reason for it is I completely saw myself, or I saw so much of the things I have been dealing with as a person over the last couple of years, anxiety wise and depression, all that type of stuff. So much of myself and my own path in what Obi-Wan was going through in the first couple episodes that it just pulled me right in. It pulled me right in because I felt so much what he was dealing with every time, like tearing up, like watching the struggle that he was going through and realizing, dude, I know that. And I know how long it took me to finally accept that I had something that I needed to get some help and I needed to get support and all that. And so watching it, like it hit me so hard. So I'm giving it a solid A because it almost made me wake up a little bit more to be able to see, for me,
I get you,
wow,
man.
like this is real. I see it. Everyone else can see it. And I want to talk about it more because there it is. That's exactly what it looks like. Like, I don't know how to describe it myself, but it looks like that how he acts, all that. And it told a great story. I mean, I just thought it told a very inclusive story that captured a lot of different dynamics, not just of Obi-Wan, but people he's around. And the Ben name thing, I really, really enjoy. It's subtle, but I love that he doubles down on it.
Too.
And I love he doubles down on it specifically because, to what you just said, he can't rejoin that other thing. That part of life is not for him anymore. So doubling down on the name Ben, I love because it's an acceptance. It's a blatant acceptance that I can't be that person anymore. I have to be something different and new. That is not something I can go back to. What I am now, it will never be that. It's going to be a new and evolved version of whatever that was before. And I think the label, the name Ben, is a clear distinction that, like, I'm not that person. I can't be that person. That world doesn't exist anymore. So what am I going to be now? I'm Ben. I'm this new persona. I've rolled a new I've rolled a new character in D&D. I've rolled a new tune in World of Warcraft. Like, I'm not that anymore. I got to be this new thing. I got to go through this in a different way than I was going before. And I really, really appreciate that about this show.
I really like that.
Awesome.
And I think yeah, we've it's been great to kind of talk all of this out. I think that Duke made a comment just now about it's a story of the kind of focusing on the story of redemption that's there, personal redemption, dealing with your past and your trauma. I couldn't agree more with you, man. Like, this was I really like this show, and that's why I hope that it's done. And I know we have to close up, but I do want to say that I just saw another comment that was in our chat there that Duke brought up Star Trek 1. I just want to say thank you for calling out V'ger. Anytime we get a great is this all that I am? Is there nothing more? Again, anybody wants to watch the opposite version of Star Wars, watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which could not be the more anti-Star Wars movie. There's nothing happens in that movie. They never fire phasers. I think they fire one photon torpedo, and that's it. But it's a great movie about a robot that comes home. But yeah, I love it. Anyway, Jeff, I close this out. We've gone like almost 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's totally cool, man. Duke, thanks for being here. Thanks everyone else for watching. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please like the video. It really does help us kind of bump up in the algorithm. We're starting to see some more traffic on that, which is fantastic. Both of us are going to start creating more content. We've been talking about this for a bit, but we're here. Like, we need to get past some big stuff for our work this year. We still have a lot of work to do, obviously, but I think we both have some mental energy to really get into the things we want to make. And we love it if you subscribe. Click the subscribe button on the channel. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Hit the notification if you want to learn about more stuff. We're putting out new content pretty regularly, including the shorts and things like that. But thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate it. A little bit of a hiatus. We're back. Obi-Wan tonight. I'm sure we're going to talk about Obi-Wan more because, I mean, duh. But there's just so much more content coming out. There's so many more things going on. We're going to be back next week with all new content like we've been doing. So we'll see you all really, really soon.
Right on. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, everybody.